Welcome to Fun and Games Side Quests. Every episode is a different host sharing a video game they love and why they love it.
Hello there. My name is Dave Jackson, and I'm the host of Tales from the Backlog. Tales from the Backlog is a video games podcast where every week I am joined by a different guest to talk about a game and go deep dive style on it without spoilers. For usually the first half or 2/3 of the episode, we are deep diving on game mechanics, story, stuff like that without spoiling you. And then after a spoiler wall, we have full spoiler discussion so that anyone can listen to Tales from the Backlog and find out what makes a game special, why should I play this game or why should I not play this game in some certain cases without being spoiled. And we strive to get into high-level discussions that everyone can listen to if you're trying to figure out what makes a game special, what makes a game worth your time. So that is Tales from the Backlog. That's where you can find me, including an episode about the game that I want to talk about today, which is Disco Elysium. And frankly, when I saw the big, Google spreadsheet of all of the stuff, all of the games that have been covered on side quests here, I was shocked that Disco Elysium was not talked about yet, because like 29 of my 30 favorite games were already talked about. But here we are, and Disco Elysium is one of my Mount Rushmore games. So if you were to ask me, give me a top 4, top 5 games that I think are most important to me, most affecting, most interesting, most fun to play, Disco Elysium is on that list. Just make up any adjective you want. Disco Elysium satisfies it for me. So I'm going to talk about Disco Elysium today, and I've also had it on the brain recently because of the kind of news about the dissolution of the Zaum Collective, the kind of creative force behind this game, and how the people who made this game were forced out. And if you play Disco Elysium and you kind of dig into the ideologies behind this game, the kind of ideologies behind this developer in the first place, it's not really surprising. It's a stroke of cruel irony that capitalism is the reason that this, company that put out this amazing coalescence of ideals in a video game form was then destroyed by capitalist forces like Amazon coming in and trying to take creative control. So I wanted to talk about Disco Elysium. People who've played, enjoy the next 10 minutes of reminiscing about why this game is awesome. People who haven't played, I really hope you do play. And for you, I'm going to make sure I don't spoil anything for you, because it really is a special game. It is like, a classic, they burned so brightly on this product. They put out such an amazing thing that it's almost poetic in a really sad way that they dissolved and were, subjected to these cruel market forces on the way out. So Disco Elysium, I wrote down just 3 things that I think make Disco Elysium such a special game here. So the first one is that I have never played a game, and I have read few books and watched few movies that approach this level of character writing and emotional intelligence. So as you play Disco Elysium, you play as a police officer who has woken up from the world's worst bender. Your character literally wakes up with your consciousness regaining consciousness. I'll find a better word when I re-record this later. No, just kidding. Your consciousness is kind of coming to in a primordial void and discovering that it's encased in a meat body, and then your character wakes up and does not remember anything, doesn't remember that they're a police officer, doesn't know what money is, doesn't know where their clothes are. They don't know what they look like, and so that's part of an early test, is to unfog the mirror and see what your character's face looks like, because they don't know. And the amnesiac character is a kind of trope, of course. It's there to help you discover the world more than it's there to help the character discover the world. But it works really well, and it's played up in a lot of interesting ways here. And it makes sense for your character to be asking questions about the history of the city that you're in, but they also don't know what money is. So they have to ask that question. And if it sounds cheesy or corny, I think it's funny in a lot of situations. The writing is stellar throughout the game. This is the first game that pops into my head when someone asks, what's a game with good writing? Disco Elysium. Instant. No hesitation. So, but back to that emotional intelligence. As your character is moving through the world and meeting people and learning their stories and kind of discovering their own backstory, why they turned out the way that they did, this game just displays an incredible amount of understanding and empathy for people. And it's just not something that you see in video games that often to this level. A lot of times you get characters that are caricatures or, fitting stereotypes of any number of, character tropes and stuff like that. And there's a little bit of that in this game. You have loud racist guy, you have corrupt union boss, et cetera, but these people all feel so much more realized than so many video game characters do. And this is a game that, like, after I played it really like downgraded a lot of characters in a lot of other games, because I've played Disco Elysium. I see what's possible. You know what I mean? So the emotional intelligence on display by them creating these characters, making their backstories, having these characters turn out the way that they did, and all of the things in people's pasts and in their present, the struggles that they're going through, all of these things feel extremely real. And the way that going through a terrible breakup can follow you, even after it's long past, the way that a small thing can send you into a spiral. These are things that this game clearly understands. The writers of this clearly understand these things, and it's on display and executed perfectly. I love that about this game. It is the thing that I appreciate the most about it. The next thing that I love about Disco Elysium is how you have this story of this character who is a mess, an absolute mess, cannot remember anything. Their mind, their emotional state is like shards of shattered glass inside of a container. It is a mess. There's no other way to put it. And what I like about this is that the game's RPG mechanics directly tie into this way that your character is. So you have 24 skills. This is an RPG where you level up, you get experience points, you pick skills to kind of build out your character the way that you want them to be. Do you want your character to be very empathetic towards other people? Do you want them to lean into authority because they're a police officer? Do you want them to invest in shivers, which is a weird skill that's hard to describe, but it's kind of like your character's connection to the city, and how they explain it as like you get a cold shiver up your spine and you have a brief connection with everything around you. You want to put points in that and just kind of live this ethereal lifestyle, you can do that. Build your character the way you want. And the way that it ties into the story is that your character has so many voices in their head, pulling them in different directions, the way that your personality does, right? Like when you're in a situation where you have decisions to make, you have the devil and the angel on your shoulder, or perhaps more. Things telling you to do certain things, things explaining things to you. All those thoughts that pop into your head are personified in this game as skills that talk to you during dialogue. What's actually happening here is that as an RPG, they're rolling dice in the background. And depending on how good you are at that skill, maybe your empathy skill will pop into a conversation and say something to you like, this character seems like they're having a very hard time, even if they're not showing it right now. Be nice to them. Very basic example. Or your electrochemistry skill will pop in and say, oh, is that a bottle of whiskey? You should drink that right now, because electrochemistry is the skill that governs, kind of animal impulses, to drinking, drugs, sex, things like that. So you have these skills constantly popping in all the time. Some of them are very helpful. Some of them are not helpful. And so this ties into the RPG system in a really interesting way. You are picking skills like you do in an RPG, but you're also picking what voices you're going to have, pulling you in different directions, what influences different parts of your personality have on your character. And I think this is excellent. This is something that my first instinct is, this is great. I want other games to do this. But the more I think about it, this is done so well here that I don't know if other people can do it as well. I don't trust the quality of writing across like the greater gaming landscape to pull this off as well as they do it in Disco Elysium. There are a couple of other RPG mechanical things that tie into the story too. Your character as a blank slate amnesiac is, like I said, a blank slate for ideas. And this game has a mechanic called the Thought Cabinet, which gamifies your character going around and picking up ideas and worldviews and things like that. Kind of like you were when you were younger. If you're exposed to an idea, you internalize it a lot more easily after kind of maybe considering it. And this game has a mechanic for that. So an easy example is the politics. There are lots of political thoughts that your character can kind of mull over time and then accept as a part of their identity. And the way that this affects your interactions with other people, it gives you stat bonuses. Sometimes it gives you bonus conversation options. It's just another, like, I think, frankly, genius way of kind of, like I said, gamifying, internalizing thoughts, rolling them over, and then taking them in as a new part of your worldview. It's really good. And the last thing about Disco Elysium that I'm going to get into before I say goodbye for today is Lieutenant Kim Kitsuragi, who is your partner in the game. No discussion of Disco Elysium should be had without at least mentioning Kim. Kim is an incredible character, one of the best sidekick characters in any video game that I've ever played. I said before that your player character is an absolute mess. Your character can go in so many different directions. They can go on a redemption path. They can lean into the drugs and alcohol. They can be as goofy or as serious as you want them to be. And Kim is the perfect kind of foil for your character as this ultra on-task, business-like police officer whose first goal is to get this case solved. And Kim will budge a little bit when your character starts to get into weird stuff. He will humor you sometimes. Other times he shuts you down because it's not what you should be focusing on at the time. And Kim starts out as a very, like I said, business-like, no fun type of person. But through the game, you'll discover that there's a lot more to Kim. And I really appreciate it. I actually came out of this game feeling like I know Kim Kitsuragi in real life. I know him. That is a person that I know personally. But he's a video game character. It's a testament to the writing in this game. I do not think you can go wrong by playing this game unless you need a game that has combat, because Disco Elysium does not. Frankly, I played 2 playthroughs of this game, probably about 60 to 70 hours total. Never once did I wish for combat. This game does just fine without it. The writing is good enough. The dialogue system is good enough. The way that the writing is presented on the right side of the screen to mimic social media is ingenious, and it's already being copied across gaming in games like Citizen Sleeper from 2022. So that's all from me today, talking about Disco Elysium. I have so many things that I want to say right now, not even getting into spoilers. Just so much that I love about this game. I hope that if you're listening to this and you've already played Disco Elysium, I hope you had a good time with it, and I hope you enjoyed reliving it with me here today. If you haven't played it, please, please, please go pick it up. I saw recently it goes down to like $10 on Steam now. It's an absolute steal for, like I said, one of my Mount Rushmore games. So thank you so much for listening. My name is Dave Jackson. Please consider checking out Tales from the Backlog. I have a almost 4-hour episode on Disco Elysium because there's so much to say. Maybe start there or find another game that you enjoy or a game you've been curious about. Because like I said, no spoilers for a while. So thank you once again for listening. Happy gaming.
Have you ever sat on a long commute or a dull day in the office and let your mind wander back to the days of rectangle pizza, bowls and bowls of sugar cereal, and gushing over your favorite cartoons and movies in school, and worry that those favorites from childhood won't hold up today? Well, the Saturday Morning Confidential podcast answers those questions for you. Host Maddie Limerick sits down with artists and creators of today to pull back the veil of nostalgia to talk about what's great and what we would change in hindsight years later. So pull on your comfiest PJs, pour yourself a bowl of your favorite cereal, and take a deep dive into the files of Saturday Morning Confidential, releasing bi-weekly on Saturdays, available on your favorite podcast platforms and at certainpov.com.
CPOV.
certainpov.com.